Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Richard Schreiber Show. In today's episode, I talk with the ever-talented Lennon Bone. Now, I discovered Lennon Bone through the YouTube channel Video Creators. They also have a podcast, and Lennon is one of the hosts on that podcast. And whilst I was listening to the show, obviously their focus is heavily on YouTube and sort of building your following through YouTube, building your business through YouTube so that you can, create the life you want, which is obviously a message that chimes with me anyway. But then during a few of the episodes, Lennon hinted at he came from a background of music. So I thought, hey, I reckon Lennon would be an amazing guy to talk to. I mean, obviously from the podcast, I heard that he talked a lot about mindset and all this, mental health and all these things that really resonated with me. So I reached out to him and he agreed to come on the show, which I was very, very happy about because we had such a nice chat. We got along really well, and he's got some fantastic nuggets of advice for you guys. And the great thing about Lennon is he comes from a musical background, but also he's got this fantastic experience in the realm of online marketing and YouTube, and that's what he does with his stopthestarvingartist.com, where he kind of encourages people to follow their passions and create a sustainable business online through that work, which, as you guys know, I love the sound of that. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. I certainly did. Lennon, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Rich. I appreciate you a ton. And, it's anytime somebody reaches out and wants to talk about the underbelly of being a creative, I'm all in.
Right. Okay. So let's kick this off. Why don't you tell the audience something surprising about yourself that not many people would know?
Something surprising. My gut goes to like a story that maybe people don't hear rather than an attribute. So I'll do both, but I'll start with the story and then I'll give an attribute that I was surprised that I even had. So maybe, because I think I've been thinking about this a lot, as creative people, we often don't see our own positive attributes. And so I'm trying to get in a better practice of speaking them aloud, and maybe everybody can follow suit with that. But one of the interesting things, so at one point, the band that I was touring that I was in for about 10 years, we got asked to be on Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations, which was really cool because he was taping an episode in the Ozarks, which is where I'm from in southern Missouri. And so we spent the whole day with him, and I got to play poker with him, and I whooped his ass. So that's all that story is. I beat him. But I will say this. There's not much more intimidating, or there wasn't for me, than having Anthony Bourdain staring across. He's so stoic and just such a presence. And they've got the movie now coming out about his life called Roadrunner that I really want to see. It's like a documentary about all his tribulations before his death. And I just saw the previews and almost was in tears already, just oh my gosh, what a troubled life for somebody that was so interesting and brilliant and just trying to be embraced. And I think of him totally as a creative in that way. So that's a cool story that I'll always get to have. And then, super honored to have that one in my pocket. And then the other thing is, I realized that I'm a connector. I don't think I ever knew that this was a thing that I was really good at. My coach had me go through an exercise where I essentially asked a bunch of people in my life that I'm closest to, the question, when Lennon walks in the room, what do you see? And which is a heavy question to go and ask your friends. And it was really challenging. But what I came out on the other side with was that a lot of people see me as somebody that is a connector that's really good at making people feel comfortable in a conversation. And so I've been really trying to put that into practice more in my community and the stuff that I'm thinking about, and just the way I talk about, the stuff that I do. So, so I'm a musician who's got to do some fun stuff, and I try to connect people.
Nice. Well, I can second the connecting. I feel very at ease. We've never spoken. I've heard you on a podcast many, many times. So I was thinking to myself, I said to my wife before I got on, I was like, I'm a little bit nervous, actually. So I am 100% at ease.
Good.
And so, I like the surprising fact that you have a superior poker face as well. That's
well, it's the beard. I think a lot of it has to do with the beard.
Yeah, that's it.
So.
Right. So you have a really fascinating career from where you started to where you are now. I'm always fascinated. What is your proudest moment of your career to date?
Yeah, I don't know. When I was thinking about this, I don't know that I can pick one. There's been a couple landmark moments, and I remember the first time, being from the Midwest in like a small town in Missouri. The first time playing in New York was like a big deal. I just remember feeling like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. Like, a lot of people from where I'm from, like, never got to do this. That was a big moment. There's just all these little like random things that have happened where I'm like, how did I end up, in these like circles of people? And it's just fascinating in that I'm a bit of a breadcrumb chaser, like, oh, that looks cool. And I feel like I need to go see what that is, And so as I've done that, it kind of started with that moment of like, okay, here's my first landmark as a musician, and I want to do that and see that happen. And then the next moment was when I was like, just realized that with my kids, I realized that if you want to get more of the things that you love in your life, you have to give something else up, right? And that was a big like pivot. I remember sitting in my kiddo's room, my oldest, who's 7 now, but she was, maybe 1, and I was kind of just thinking and resonating on stuff, and it was like, I love this right now. I want this to be a big part of my life. I want to be a good dad. I want to like be a good family man. And I realized like, if I want to get more of the things that I love in my life, I have to give other things up. And what are those things? And what are the things that are keeping me from this, and being a touring musician was a big part of that at that time. So I ended up giving that up within the next like year or so. And I would say that was one of the most pivotal moments for me too. Not because, mostly because it was like the first time maybe in my life where I felt like I fully made the decision for me and what I needed in my life as well. And that was a big thing. Cause this, like often it's like, oh, I'll keep at it because I know other people are depending on me, or I'll keep doing this because it would make so-and-so happy. And it still may lead to this other thing. And you just kind of like are always chasing it for the sake of like the what ifs, and so that was the first moment where I was like, no, this is just the right thing to do. So yeah, I think that first moment of like, I made it, I'm doing something interesting. And then that moment of like, I'm giving that up to do something else interesting. I think those two stand out.
See, I love that. I love the second one because no one ever talks about that side of the things that we do and how much of a strength of character it takes to give up something that you probably enjoy. And is giving, as you say, is bringing something to your life, whether that's dependence, or monetary aspects, or other things like that. It's like the big leap, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because, and also I liked what you said earlier about following breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're doing there is you had a loaf of bread, but you saw another trail of breadcrumbs somewhere else, and I think that's amazing. I had a similar experience when before I went as a full-time composer. I was teaching at schools. I loved teaching, but it was, I I thought to myself, actually, I need to, like you say, this needs to move out of the way to make way for the composing to come in.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to know, did anything kind of interesting happen that within the few months where you decided to stop being a touring musician, did something suddenly come your way?
Yeah, actually, and this is the story of my life, you know, in a weird way, is that when I say that thing about breadcrumbs, I really mean it. Like I feel like I get these gut feelings where things feel really scary and really challenging, but it just feels like I know deep down I need to try this and see what happens. And so I left that, and about that time, I had been introduced to a guy who had mixed a record that I had played drums on, and in Kansas City, which is where I live. And he and I kind of hit it off, and he ran a recording studio there. And I was like, hey, can I come just like hang out? He's like, yeah, totally. And so that led into a relationship of me being another engineer out of that space and getting my own clients, doing production work and audio work. And then that led to kind of building a little B room that was mine for a while. And then my next moment was like after that, where I started my YouTube channel and was like, okay, I really want to see what this is. And that led me to working with a guy named Tim Schmoyer, who I work for now as a strategist for a company where we work with people with either, you know, hundreds to millions of subscribers on their YouTube channels to help them continue to grow their platform. So any of those like gut moments, I've just been like, I'm going to go just see what happens. And they always lead to something when I persist. When I let them go and it's like, oh, well, I'm just scared, you know, and I'm a bit in that right now, actually. I'm feeling that same feeling. And so there's some interesting stuff kind of on the crux. So
ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally get that. It's that learning to listen to whether you call it the gut. I like to call it my quiet whisper. There's like there's a little voice saying that there's another thing I should be doing. Or like you said, oh, why don't you just try this YouTube thing? See what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't told this story much, but well, no, I've told it a few times. I lied. My wife would be like, Lennon, you've told this story a bunch.
It's new to
me. So when I was doing the production thing, I was also doing some co-writing and seems like kind of similar. Like I was fishing for commercials, like, okay, I'm going to try to like land, you know, and for those out there that maybe don't know that side of it, sometimes there'll be a call for music. And, you know, I was doing some stuff with companies and they'd say, hey, you know, call to composers, like write this thing. And so I was working a little bit with this girl, Kay Flay, who's like a pop, like singer, songwriter, like hip hop kind of gal who's incredibly talented. And she's gone on to do really big things now. And so we didn't know each other well, but we had kind of co-written this song. And I was like, she would be amazing for this commercial. It was a Diet Coke spot. And so I was like, okay, let's like, I don't know if I should call her. And my wife's like, what's the worst that she says no? Like, who cares, right? Like, just ask. So I did. And she's like, yeah, let's do it. And we had 2 days to turn it me and so it was like, okay, we did it. And then it came down to me and her, me and her, and then one other tune. We ended up losing the gig. We didn't get the gig, but it was one of those things where I felt just so much more comfortable in that relationship. And that was a big moment for me too. I was like, okay, I can kind of chase these little trails. So fast forward a little bit, this song that she and I had co-written ended up landing a commercial in Germany, which was like the biggest beer spot that year. It made me like $43,000 or something like that, like an insane amount of money for me. And like, most creative people would be like, oh my God, that's nuts, you know? Yeah. And so that was the moment where I was like, and I have a faith background, but it was like, it felt like that was a gift. Like God was like, here's this money. What are you going to do with it now? You got time. It's not about the money. It's about the time. Like, what are you going to take this money and invest that time into something. And that's where the YouTube thing started kind of moving forward. And it's funny because you have these things. I'm like, well, I'll grow a YouTube channel and it'll be huge and all these things. My YouTube channel is still really small, but but that's the ironic part, is that it's led me down this whole other series of roads that I would have never expected.
Yeah, I think also just a little side note on your YouTube channel. Listeners, you need to watch it because the videos are fantastic because they speak to a very small niche.
Yeah.
But that small niche is very active. And, I know how, and you know how important that is. It's not necessarily the size of the audience. It's how active the community within that audience is. But yeah, fascinating. It's really interesting about the idea that you got this gift.
Yeah.
And also it's how people see those things, isn't it? So you saw that as, here's some money, now you've got time.
Yeah.
Whereas you could have easily been like, here's some money, do that more, there's so many ways you could, but it's so personal the way you go about that stuff and how you interpret what is being given to you by, whether you call it God or the universe, So yeah, fascinating. Now we've kind of talked about these really interesting times in your life, which all seem very pivotal, where there's a lot of change. Now, at what point did all this start for you? What was your earliest creative memory? Where it all kind of clicked for you and you saw this path ahead of you?
I think that the earliest memory that I can have where I was like, something's here, there's something to chase. I was too young to be in a bar, and I was in a bar. That's an interesting way to start that story. I was too young to be, I didn't mean to do it that way. But so my dad is a bass player, and he played in the original house band for B.B. King's Club in Memphis. And so, the people that I was staying with, the family I was staying with, they had taken me there to see him play. And, I was probably 10, 12 years old, like, again, too young to be there, but they allowed it because dad was playing. And just this really interesting moment of like seeing them up there playing and me thinking like, this is amazing. There's like something here that is really different from anything else that I experience in my life, and I can't put my finger on like what it was. I think it was the atmosphere. It was the interest of the audience. It was the fact that they looked like they were having a great time. It's just all these different things that kind of worked into that. And so that was the first time I remember being like, I want to figure out how to do that. And I would actually go, and my dad played on a bunch of records, blues records, and some like country things and stuff. And I remember just listening to a lot of the records that he was on and just thinking like, and some of these dudes went, like one of the guys went on to play with like Toto as their new like guitarist and vocalist and stuff. So like, doing these are incredible musicians. So it was just like really fascinating because I remember listening to the drummer in a lot of this and being like, I want to do that because all the other guys do all the work. I get to just like support if I play the drums. And so, but it still felt like it was such an important, like integral part. And I can remember that so clearly, just thinking like the guitar player is shredding, but I don't want to be a shredder. Like I love listening to it. It's almost like it would be the excuse to be in the band with people that could shred by just like holding down the thing. And ironically, like, or maybe not so, like I feel like I've always been really good in a support role. And maybe that was intuition, that it's like that. I just feel like I'm always in a position where it's like, I can help steer a ship a lot better than I can being the full blown like front man or like leader of it,
Fab. So obviously you were quite young. Was it just like, hey, I'm gonna get drum lessons now?
Yeah, I asked this family that I was living with. I was like, I think I want to play the drums because I was in just about to be in band for the first time, so like maybe fifth grade or something. And I was like, I want to play the drums, and they're like, oh well, you probably don't because you're just gonna get like a snare drum, and I don't think that's really what you're trying to do. And again, these small towns, so there was not a lot of guys there that I could just be like, I'm gonna go take lessons, for kit or whatever. So they actually put me. They're like, well, would you play something else? I was like, well, maybe the trumpet or something. That seems cool. So I actually played trumpet, and then later went on to tour in like DCI, like Drum Corps International, which is like a professional marching band kind of thing, essentially. Wow. Like, and the one that I was in there, I think when I was in it, we were like 6th or 7th in the world, something like that. So pretty substantial, like really cool thing to be a part of. You can only do it till you're 21, and then you quote unquote age out. And so kind of keeps this fresh. And now what the kids do now is light years beyond. I mean, it's nuts. It's so crazy.
Is it like a mixture of acrobatics and brass band?
It's like brass and percussion. And so there's no woodwind instruments. They've kind of fought to bring in some woodwinds, but as any competitive thing goes, they're always like, no. And there was even a big fight for electronics for years. When I was in it, there were no electronics, and now there are. And yeah, it's a lot of like, that sort of avant-garde artistry, like mixed in with, these sort of marching band elements. And it's really fascinating. It takes the whole scoring system, obviously, on like, how, what are they doing well at the same time as playing, how easy is it to read, like what's happening from a perspective of the viewer and things like that. It's super, super interesting.
Wow. I would have struggled to do anything other than play. Like if I was marked on like, what is he doing whilst he's playing? I would have got terrible points, I mean, so I am sorry. I'm just really intrigued. What did you have to do? Because when you say DCI competitive brass band, I either imagine a bunch of youngsters like we have here, the British brass bands. Although they're not youngsters, they're usually quite old. Sort of sat in a circle playing beautiful brass music.
So a buddy of mine is we have actually a couple of my friends. We have a brass band actually here in Kansas City who's came over and I believe won the British Open for brass bands maybe twice now. I can't remember. So, hey, right here, we got some blood here in the water over in Kansas City, believe it or not.
Yeah.
They're incredible. And watching those ensembles is like, when you want to talk about notes, like that's some fun stuff to watch because they are just ripping some crazy stuff that you're like, these instruments are not meant to play these kinds of pieces, and it's so fun. No. So it's kind of like that idea of how do you bring out these like interesting showman ideas but with movement and choreography, and so you can picture like a college or like a university marching band or something, but just doing it at like a really, really high level with full blown like upper body is fully still and the lower body's doing like choreography and things like that. It's really interesting.
Wow. So like pitch perfect for brass.
Yeah, you should go look it up. I'll send you a couple links.
Please do.
Yeah.
Oh mate. So we're going from these big brass spectaculars of you in the DCI. Obviously you aged out, and I presume that's when you went into the rock band. Or were you?
Yeah, that's when I started touring. Yeah.
So I hate to twist the tale a little bit, but I'm very intrigued as to, throughout this career, because you've kind of touched on moments of not indecision, but moments of change. And for me, those moments of change often are tied in with kind of low emotional points.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about when you have been in lowest emotionally?
Yeah. So we were in Europe for our second tour. And by that point, I had felt, like we'd go over there and not really make much money. And I was feeling like I'd already had this kind of moment with my kiddo of like, okay, this is what I really want, is figure out how to balance more of my family. And, because we were doing at our peak, like 150 plus dates a year, so we were out on the road a lot. Ooh. Yeah. So it wasn't like weekend warrior, like it was for real, and it's like all you could do at that time to like really try to strike up a following is just to be out on the road all the time. So we were in Belgium, I think. And I remember specifically like the conversation of making another record coming up and me just like almost losing it, just being incredibly frustrated. At that time I was, to be completely transparent, like I was drinking a lot. I felt very low and was just, like do the gig and then just drink the rest of the night just to like get through the whole thing. There was a lot of that there's a lot when I look back at that time that it's like, it's kind of painful to think about it. Cause I'm like, I don't like that guy, because the battle that was happening there was this idea of like, here's this ego-driven thing that I've wanted for myself my whole life. And here's this other thing that I know is probably just the better choice and will lead to more happiness, in general. Because everything I did up to that point was proving. I was like trying to prove somebody something, like prove something to somebody, and somebody listening may resonate with this, where it's like you had friends or family that's like, hey, this is not very likely, don't expect this, all those kinds of like, they're trying to look out for you. Their doubt is a protective mechanism. And I had a lot of that in my life, including my dad, who I think I know he was just trying to protect me from a situation that he had been in. I know it came from a good place, but it wasn't ever from support. So I had to feel like, well, maybe if I prove to them that I can do this, I will get support. And the truth is that never comes, just because people don't know how. Typically, if they can't support you in that first moment, they won't know how to do it when it's working, because they already don't understand it. And that was a big realization for me later on. And so in this moment of like being on the road all the time, being overseas, not able to talk to anybody, and literally feeling like I was living two lives, because I'd be on the road, get done like playing a gig, and people are like, that was so cool, blah, blah, blah. And you feel like, oh, great, stroke the ego or whatever. And then you get home and then nobody cares, and it's like, you have nobody that can relate to it. And my wife and I would constantly be trying to like rekindle our relationship without feeling like we could get too close, because just knowing like I was just going to leave again. And so it's this really bizarre give and take. There's a lot of romance tied into being, a working touring musician. And I have friends that still do it to this day. And very few of them are really good at making relationships work at the same time. The relationships that work for them usually are the ones that they're in when they're on the road. The home ones are a lot more challenging. And not to say it can't be done, because some people, I do have friends that do it really well, but a lot of people that I've known, it's just a struggle. And so I knew I didn't want to be in that. So that was an incredibly low point that took a long time to come out of, because then there was an identity crisis after that of like, well, this is what I've been known for. And literally having people say like, how does it feel, or do you miss being a drummer now? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I still gig all the time, like, because I don't do this thing, like I've lost, I was so annoyed and frustrated, but it just opened my eyes to this idea of people's lack of understanding. And when I'm looking to get that, it's never going to be worth anything.
You raised a really interesting point that again, I don't often hear people mentioning, and actually it's only come up in my mind today. My wife was listening to a podcast. She was saying about I wish I could credit the correct podcast, I'll put it in the show notes. The guest was saying about how when she hears about people finding success, she says, I hope they have support, because so few people know how to support somebody who's actually succeeding. Because, like you say, they either don't understand that a level of success, or a level of jealousy comes in. I mean, I resonate with that ideal of like trying to prove people wrong tremendously.
Yeah.
You know, I think anyone who's been a creative, or at least as a teenager, 20 something, whatever, admitted out loud to anyone, I'm going to do something arty for a living. They were like, good luck with that. I'll see you fail in a few years. You know, you're not going to earn any money. All the kind of cliches, and that stuff, luckily for me, was just fuel on the fire. But as you say, you get to a point where you go, oh, damn it, I realize I've been pushing myself so hard to prove other people wrong. But do I still want to do this? Do you know? And I think that ties into something you've been talking about, which is listening to that curiosity and your gut. So once you had this realization that you know, obviously you're in this really tough time in your life, how did you work through that? Was it just a case of saying, I'm going to stop this, and then it was fine? You know, how did you work? Because obviously you probably had a lot of anger. I mean, I know, you know, I can imagine there'd be a lot of confusion, which usually leads to anger. And
I don't, that's a good question, because I don't, I don't know that there's one, you know, there's a lot of things tied into that, you know, and I'll say to kind of put a pin in that idea of the proving thing. And the reason I'll just like really caution people that are in that space is that will start to show up in ways that actually prevents you from having success where you need it. For instance, for me, it caused me to be afraid to relinquish control of even somebody editing my videos, or somebody helping me schedule things, or, you know, because I felt like, no, I'm going to prove to you that I can do it all. Right. And we're just not into it. And like, we're not wired that way. And so I just want to caution anybody that like is feeling that. It can be a little bit of a driver, and that can be good to get you going. But the faster you can get away from that idea, I think, the better. The thing that kind of like shifted for me was I mean, I had a lot of loss after that. So my mom died, and then my gram died, and those were both like big. You know, they both raised me. And so that was really challenging to kind of sift through all that. And my mom was an alcoholic when I was a kiddo. So it was like, there's a lot of baggage inside that too. And so the coming out of that, then I had to figure out like, okay, what's this look like to just do this for me and my family? You know, like what's my goals for my family? Because I think that's the other part of all this is like when you're trying to prove something to somebody, you're often looking to them for all of your, for the cue, for the lead of like, okay, did they think that was good? Did they like that? Like, are they impressed yet? You know, whatever it is. And I had to say, no, this is not about them. This is about what my goals are with my own family and my wife. And my wife's a brilliant illustrator. And so we just kind of sat down and started to develop a vision of like, who do we want to be as parents? Who do we want to be as creatives? Who do we want to be as individuals and as a couple? And that was big, a big shift for us. And then even in the last like year, hiring a coach to kind of help me. So I hired a life coach to help me kind of go through some of those things. I've done therapy some, but the moments within that has just been a consistent question of like, what is the motive with everything I'm doing? Who is this really for and why? I heard I've talked about this on my YouTube channel. I heard a thing. I don't remember where it was, but it was essentially the story is like there's an older guy, like a grandfather who's there with his grandson. And he says, there are two wolves inside your head that are constantly like fighting against each other. One is like your ego, selfishness, frustration, envy, all of those kinds of things. And the other one is love, support, giving, relationships, all of that kind of stuff. And the kid asked the grandfather, well, who wins? And he said, whichever one you feed. And that really like knocked me back a second, because I now often will stop and say, which wolf am I feeding right now if I'm thinking about this thing? And it ain't perfect, but it's definitely made a big difference.
That's a fantastic tool to gain that little bit of awareness, because I don't know about you guys or you, Lennon, but sometimes, especially if I'm tired, I find myself sat there and I would have been thinking almost like going down a little spiral, and then you stop and go, wait, they're just thoughts, but I can change them.
Yeah.
But that getting the awareness is often the hardest thing. And that little, I don't know what you'd call it, anecdote?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
A little like parable or something. Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's it. Story with a meaning. That would do the job. Which one are you feeding right now? Mm-hmm. That's a great thing to bring forward. So let's talk about you now, Lennon. Obviously, you're working with Tim at Video Creators, and you've got your own YouTube channel and consultancy. Mm-hmm. And I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit more about what it is that you do.
Yeah. So with Video Creators, we work with YouTubers. And so if you're specifically trying to like grow a YouTube channel, then that's what we help people do. And with my own, as I've talked about so much of like my kind of journey and all of these things, it's been interesting because what I'm starting to see is that all of these things I've been picking up are like ingredients for the next thing, and I think we start to notice that, where it's like, okay, well, initially I was a drummer, and that's something I still do, and I still gig a lot, and that helps just like keep me sane and like be able to perform and enjoy that. And then I have these production things that have actually manifested in different ways, where I'm like, oh, I didn't expect like to be able to use it with video or these other ideas, or and now having kind of changing my relationship with creativity and what my life looks like. I'm kind of coming back to music now to figure out where it fits in my new sort of state of mind, if I can put it that way, because I feel like it used to be such an escape, and now that I don't feel like I'm running from as much, it's harder to find a spot for it, because I'm like, oh, okay, it's not fulfilling the same role, so where does that fit now? So I'm kind of figuring that out. But what's so fun about that is like my favorite conversations, I realized oftentimes were the ones where I was sitting with my buddies on like a porch after a tour or something, or when I was working with a client, and afterwards they're like, how do I make, like, I want to figure out how to like make more money from this. I want to figure out how to like, grow my following and my audience. And what's been cool is I got to do that from a very old school grassroots way of like, you go hoof it on the road and you just like slug it out for years. And now I've also been trained to do it online. And so I'm really passionate about merging those two worlds, because I think the problem with online is that everybody feels like it's the quick fix. It's not the quick fix. It's just a different avenue. It's the new like touring. It's the new whatever, right? But connection is still of the utmost importance. And so it's my passion to help creators like grow their audience, but from a very authentic place. There's a lot of like, go do this tactic, go be, go copy this thing. If you just do A, B, and C, you'll get D. we all know that as creative people, it just doesn't really work that way, because we all have such individualized pathways and goals. And it should be that way, because what starts to happen is when we try to fit into someone else's goal box, it's all the stuff I talked about. You start to feel frustrated. You don't understand why you're not like excited about the stuff that you're doing. You hit a goal and you don't even acknowledge it. You're just ready for the next thing. And so what I want to do is help creatives to change the way they see their own worth internally. And by helping them develop a new relationship with themselves and with finances and with the way they put themselves out there, and to recognize that the landscape has changed and it's time that we just embrace that and do it from a very authentic place that, isn't somebody else's plan. Like, you can use their tactics, but create your own plan. That's okay. And so I'm here to help people kind of navigate those waters, because it can feel very, very frustrating sometimes and a little confusing when you're just like, I've got all this information. Where do I start?
I'm just nodding, consistently nodding through that entire thing. That was amazing. And also the lovely thing is hearing your story, and this is the thing, isn't it? You hear someone's story and their history, their past sort of adds up to the whole that is their present. I loved how everything kind of fitted together. So with this fantastic business where you're kind of essentially trying to teach people to find their authentic selves creatively, what does your day look like when you're doing this?
Oh, it's a nightmare sometimes. That's kind of, I was talking about, I'm feeling this gut thing of like, what is the next thing, and so that's where a lot of these gut things are coming from, is like, I recently scaled back a handful of hours at Video Creators to try to make a little more time for my business. So it's kind of on a week. So if I looked at it, Mondays are like content days where I'm thinking really only about my own business and what's going on. And so I'll either try to shoot videos or think through stuff, or yesterday was all about like rewriting an email funnel or doing something like that, and then Tuesdays are all Video Creators days. So like today, before our call, we had all of our team meetings, and then I'll go back after this and like be inside of our community, because I'm the manager for all the community side of Video Creators, and also run our VIP program, which is like kind of people that have gone through a lot of our curriculum. Wednesdays are kind of a mishmash of like, okay, can I make another video today? Who do I need to be in touch with? And then every week I have office hours for my community, which is called The Collective. And so, which I'm going to be opening up again. If by the time you listen to this, I haven't already, for people, but it's a training program where essentially there's new material or a new focus every month with new material every week. And the goal is, this is for like the busy creative person who's like, okay, I want to figure out how to make some money. I want to figure out how to grow my audience, but I don't feel like I have a lot more time. So this is to literally replace their current strategy. So I'm saying like, if it's not working for you, here's what you can do in your social media this week. And here's how you can apply these new thought patterns right away. And then we'll have an office hours, which is a live call with me. A lot of people do these where it's just like a webinar kind of thing. I hate that. It's like, let's all get in the room where we can look at each other's face and I can make fun of you. And just kidding. I don't really do that. But people can make fun of me. That's okay. But I'm so into the connection side of it. So that's a big part of it. And I'm having to check our Slack group. So it's like, I'm literally running 2 communities at once all the time. And then on top of that, teaching our Video Labs course over at Video Creators, and then coming up with, next week's teachings for my community. And right now there's just a lot. So I finally got an assistant and an editor that are doing well with like keeping me on track. And then I just try so hard by Friday night to set it all down, and then just spend the weekend either with the wife and kiddos, or like sometimes I'll, play, or I'll have a gig or something on the weekends, but I try to only do that maybe once a month right now.
Amazing. So I just want to say how tough it is to run a community, and
it's crazy. Yeah,
you're running two. What?
Yeah. But that's when I started. You talked about like the big leap. You mentioned the big leap. So there's a book called The Big Leap for anybody listening.
Yeah, by Gay Hendricks.
So great.
Yeah.
And so when I did a lot of those exercises, I realized that wading through, like helping people wade through those like unknowns, that's like my zone of genius. That's my favorite thing, is just like listening and asking difficult questions, but doing so in a way that's like genuinely curious of like, okay, let's go deeper. What's the real issue here? Because most people are like, well, I want to grow my following. And I'm like, yeah, but why? Like, there's a reason why you want these things, and we need to uncover that so that you can play the long game and actually make that happen. Otherwise, you're just going to burn out because, you're not setting a real targeted vision. So those are the things that I've realized I love. And so it just makes sense that doing these communities would work. But it's making me build mine how I want to. So I'm not super active in like a group chat thing or anything. I'm like, I tell them I'm terrible at emails. Be ready for that. But you will get the best from me when we do these calls and when we have this material.
Fab. Yeah, I do a similar thing at the Training Music School, which is one of my online communities. Once a month, I go on and I'll answer a selection of their questions, and then I'll review some of their tracks. And it's really nice because although like you said, I'm also terrible with emails. I think everyone is, because we get too many of them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so nice to see their faces. It's like hanging out with buddies, because I've seen them for so long. Some of them have been there for years now. So I see the appeal of that completely.
Dude, I might have to ask you questions as I'm figuring this stuff out. I'd love to hear kind of how you've grown that. That's so cool.
Yeah, of course. Happy to help, man. Happy to help. So because you've got so many things going on during your week, do you find that there is like a certain point in the day when you are most productive?
I think I'm a morning person, which is kind of weird. Like a mid-morning person usually works really well. So even this weekend, my wife and I we were sitting on the porch. It's probably like 10:30 or 11, and I was like, oh, I played her this song that I thought was really cool. She's like, oh, that makes me want to like go make something. Like we should just go, because the kids were playing. She's like, we should just go have some creative time. I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then 2 hours later, I was like, oh, okay, that was good. Like that felt like a thing. But that's the problem with so much of what all of us are trying to do online, is that there are so many interruptions. And so the thing I'm learning is like, the more I can design my day to say like, this will interrupt me here and I will only allow it here, that's been really helpful. And then to also say, this brings me zero energy and it sucks all the life out of me. I need to give it to somebody else. Those are two very challenging things. And having kids and all that, like, their schedules are always changing, which means my schedule's always changing. And, so my wife and I joke that it's like we're running a casino here at our place, because I'll work during the day and then I'll take over at like 5 o'clock, and then she'll work till like 12 or 1:30 on her stuff. And so it's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah, my wife and I have a similar arrangement. She's an artist, so we kind of try to juggle we've got 3 kids, looking after the 3 kids, looking after ourselves, looking after our businesses. It's a lot of juggling.
It is, yeah. But it's so much more fun this way. And to see our kids like say things like, oh, my mom like she's an illustrator, or, my dad plays the drums, and, it's just cool to hear kids say that with no judgment of what their potential is. I think that's such a beautiful thing. And it's really exciting to think about. And I love that, if anything, that we all complain about social media and all this stuff. If anything, though, people are like, oh, these kids want to be YouTubers. Man, who cares? Like, that's actually a legit option though. You know, the difference between that and like, you know, saying, well, I want to be a pro football player. There's no comparison. You know, because you can go and build a following of a few thousand people on YouTube and develop a business out of it and be fine. And, you know, people are like, they are so dismissive of anything in the creative field. I love that we're in a space now where I think creatives are showing up in a new way. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's very exciting, isn't it? Because also you see the youngsters. God, I say, yeah, I can't believe I just said that. See, oh, it's happened.
It's
finally.
Okay. It's okay. We're old. We can take it now.
Yeah. When you see the younger generation reacting creatively to these new social networks, you know, yes, there are dark sides to them, especially in the mental health space, but actually when used as a tool correctly, like any tool, when used correctly, like there's amazing things being done. So wonderfully creative and inspiring. And it's nice because it's sparking inspiration in other people too.
Yes. And we'll see it. I mean, it's going to F up the whole education system is going to be dismantled over the next, I don't know how many years, but I think universities in at least, you know, the way that I think they operate as a whole won't exist at some point, because it's all going to go peer-to-peer or like mentorship programs. Granted, like being a doctor or a lawyer, these like higher profile things where you do need that. But for people like me and you, it's like, I don't think a degree is going to be necessary at all. I think there's going to be tons of programs where people won't think twice about it. And it's already that. They don't care where you went to school. They want to see your resume, like, or see your work. What have you done? So
yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And on that note, what advice would you give someone who is struggling in their creative journey? I feel like this is like giving you the chance to hit a home run right here. No pressure.
Yeah, I was gonna say thanks, Rich. Appreciate you just like teeing me up for failure. Meanwhile, what people can't see is that I'm wearing a T-shirt with a burrito on it. So you know, what do you take this all as a grain of salt, or with a grain of salt, however you say it. Someone who's struggling. So I'll say it to my person, you know, and I don't mean that as like a dismissive statement. I feel like the struggle is usually coming from a place of, I got my day job, I got my thing that like has to be done. There is a limited amount of time for me to find creativity in my day. But you're the kind of person that's like, yeah, I need this in my life. You've stuck with it in some way, shape, or form for like an amount of time that is just proven like this is not something that just goes away. Like this is a thing that lives in you, right? This is like a part of who you are. You don't get to choose that kind of stuff. It just exists within us. We don't ever get to let that go. It may show up in, just like in my story, it may show up in multiple places over the course of your lifespan. The biggest thing that I would say is that whatever is the breadcrumb that you have right now, frickin' chase it, because you don't. Two things have happened to me this year. One, a heavy loss of someone that was in the same age bracket as me. It is arrogant. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but it is, right? And we're all going to deal with that. And it's arrogant to assume that we have tomorrow to do the thing. And so why not go and do it? And the best creatives are not just, you know, creative consumers, they're creative contributors. And what do I mean by that? I think a creative contributor is somebody who is doing it from a heart of service. This is intended for someone else as well as you. And when you lead with service, you don't have to worry about the people that don't care. You know, I talked about this the other day. It's like, if I know that I am out to find my kids, like I want to like help them and they're in danger, like they need something from me, and we're in a crowded park, right? There's 1,000 people around. What am I going to do? I'm going to yell at them at the top of my lungs. And some people are going to look at me weird. Some people are going to get annoyed because they're having their ice cream and like I've disrupted their day. And some people are going to go, what do you need? Who are you trying to like find? And if, as long as my focus is on the person I'm really trying to reach, and I am just speaking at like yelling to them. Some people will help me get there. Some people will try to stop me. And the ones that help are the ones that you need to stick with. And then when you find that person, it's all a game changer because nothing matters. The thing that gets in all of our way is the concern about the people that we are making uncomfortable. It is not our job to make everybody comfortable. It is our job to show up for a certain kind of person in a very real and supportive way, as artists, as creatives, as people that have service businesses, as people that just want to inspire and lead. So a creative contributor is not just somebody who makes something and throws it on the internet. You're doing it to serve somebody, and you show up to be a leader in your space. And I think you have that inside you, whether you realize it or not. You just have to believe it enough to chase the first breadcrumb and not be so worried. It doesn't need to be permanent. It doesn't need to be forever. We can let something go and move on to the next thing, and it'll be just fine. And there's a lot of freedom in that mindset versus feeling like, okay, if I do this now, it's going to last my whole, like, this is it. You know, I got to do this thing. It's like, let the pressure off and just go and see what happens.
Dude, I loved that analogy. That was beautiful. That was just like, if ever anyone has described finding your niche and finding your ideal client, I think that was the winner. Lennon.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, sometimes I just like think of what's the most important thing right now. And for me, it's my kids, you know? So it's like, we've had those moments where it's like, where's our kid? We're in the park. Like, where are they? You know? And that urgency creates, you just like focus. We need that focus. And I lose it too. It's not to say that it's easy. It's just that, like you said, it's always about awareness. It's like, how can we get better at, maybe usually it takes us a day before we realize what we're really trying to do. Well, next time, can you make it happen just a minute sooner? You know, and eventually that starts to really add up. And then it's like, okay, now I'm aware pretty often when I'm screwing up. I don't always acknowledge it and fix it, but I can at least be aware enough to be like, all right, you're an idiot right now. Like, let's just relax. And then I can kind of let it go. But I think that is such a big part of it too, is just not putting so much pressure on ourselves. We're like, I want to have a great boss and I want to do this thing I love. And then we treat ourselves like the worst boss ever. It's like, it doesn't add up.
Oh, it's absolutely right. And the thing is, no one teaches you that. No one teaches you how to be how to be kind to yourself. You know, everyone's just like, work long days until you get everything done, and then keep working once you've done that. You know, my thing is like, I'll set myself a to-do list and I'll go, well, I've done that. Let's move on to tomorrow's list. I've got time. And then before I realize it, I'm just piling the work on myself. And it's like, actually, no. As you say, I've got other priorities that I want to do, you know. But dude, that was fantastic. And Lennon, thank you so much for coming on. I absolutely loved that stuff you said at the end. That was, yes.
Thanks. Dude, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Mate, that stuff about service as well. I wanted to mention that. The stuff about service, I think that's, you know, Pat Flynn always talks about that, doesn't he? You know, do service. Yeah. And I think that's so interesting and important. You know, like you said, you find your niche and you serve them because it's given.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like, oh, it's such a, I think some people brush that off as like, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me because I do portraits, or I'm an abstract artist, or I make ambient music or whatever. The truth is, and everything that I teach is about this, is like, the thing you make does not matter. And I don't mean that to be like completely abrasive, but like, things are a dime a dozen, you know. It's the why behind what you make that really matters. And so I always think of like this Venn diagram of, you have your life on the left side and all your experiences and all of these things that you've gone through, and then you have your art and creativity on the right side. And where those two things meet, that's where people start to care. They don't care otherwise. You're just another scrollable thing on Instagram if you just make things, you know. So all that other stuff is maybe more important in many ways, because it's the feelings that get somebody to take action. It's not just a thing, right? When they feel something, they'll move.
Absolute gold. Absolute gold. Dude, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure having you and hearing your story and those absolute pearls of wisdom at the end as well. You know, I cannot agree with you any more profusely.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, I appreciate it, and we'll have to swap. I'm starting a podcast that releases a week from today. So right now it's the 13th. So on July 20th, if you're listening to this on July 20th, then you can look for the Stop the Starving Artist podcast. And so we'll be talking about a lot of these kinds of things. We should get you on there. We'll just book it today.
Dude, I would love that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's do it.